Nothing slows down a project quite like the approval process. Your team can be trucking along full speed ahead, next thing you know, your project hits a wall in stakeholder review. One stakeholder keeps sending new rounds of revisions while another hasn't responded to any of your emails, and your timeline feels the crunch. It happens to the best of us, but you don't have to sit back and watch your project crash. Benjamin Franklin said, "An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure." So why not apply that idea here? Here's how to keep stakeholders on track and your project plan intact, and what to do if things go wrong anyway. You can't get ahead of a problem if you don't know what you're dealing with. So let's identify some common reasons the approval process can go wrong. Do any of these bottlenecks sound familiar? Stakeholders provide conflicting feedback. There are too many reviewers with an unclear chain of approval. Reviewers lose sight of the original project goals. You end up in a never-ending cycle of revisions because scope and timing for review are left unclear, or a stakeholder misses an approval deadline. You've probably encountered every single one of these holdups in your projects, maybe even all at once. The good news is you can absolutely take steps to keep your projects in check. Here's how it's done. It's a lot harder to succeed if you don't know what success looks like in the first place. So before you even start to write your plan, discuss review and approval with stakeholders, and let their input shape how the process will work. Here are some tips that can help you engage stakeholders in a productive conversation about the feedback process before a deliverable lands in their lap for review. Leaving scope wide open for the feedback process inevitably leads to more work, killing your project budget and timeline. So be specific about how many days and rounds of revisions a review cycle includes. That way everyone's on the same page about and comfortable with the scope you set together. Want to avoid too many cooks in the kitchen with no one clearly calling the shots? Set clear roles and responsibilities for each deliverable before the project starts, and be prepared to reiterate this to keep people on task as work progresses. Use TeamGantt's RACI feature to document roles and responsibilities so it's easy for your team and stakeholders to see what falls on who. Stakeholders are busy folks, and you don't want to send a deliverable for approval only to find out your stakeholder just left for a 2-week vacation. Talking about availability with stakeholders on the front end enables you to build your project schedule around their out-of-office time. It's also a good idea to ask stakeholders to designate a backup reviewer so you won't be left in the lurch if and when plans change. A good process doesn't happen on its own, so work with your stakeholders to figure out how feedback will be collected and accepted. Things can get out of hand fast, especially if you're working with a large stakeholder group, so do your best to channel feedback through a single stream to minimize confusion and help prevent unnecessary bog downs brought on by free-for-all debates. At TeamGantt, we like using a shared document that's written in one voice with a direct style so it's easier to resolve conflicts and get to work more quickly. Here are a few ideas to help you keep feedback in check. Ask stakeholders to designate one person to wrangle all their feedback and send it back in a format that's actionable and easy to understand. This makes sure feedback comes back to you in one consistent voice. It also pushes stakeholders to work out differences amongst each other, so follow-up conversations and arguments don't drag your timeline down. This tactic works really well for high-stakes projects that require input from many busy stakeholders. It helps come to content decisions more quickly as a team, so you have a clear path forward for addressing feedback and securing final approval. This makes it easier to keep tabs on version control. It doesn't matter what tool you use, as long as stakeholders have easy access and clear guidelines for how, when, and why to use it. Just keep in mind that your process may look different for each project depending on what tools your stakeholders use, whether stakeholders are internal versus external, and what stage your project is at. Now it's time to formalize your process by putting tasks, dates, and assignments around it. Make sure tasks and milestones are spelled out really clearly so it's easy to follow along when you present your plan to stakeholders. Remember, creating a project plan is only the beginning. You also need to talk about it. So highlight key approval milestones and work with stakeholders to answer these questions. Who should be involved at each stage of the review? Does the timing for review and approval work? And how will we narrow down feedback and come to a decision? Yes, you may have discussed all of these things at the outset of the project, but things change and stakeholders aren't as dialed into the project details like you are. Consider this a golden opportunity to check in on previous decisions and confirm they still make sense. After all, it's easier to adjust the plan before work gets underway. Once work begins, you'll need to keep a close eye on how things are actually progressing and keep stakeholders in the loop along the way. You're not doing your job as a project manager if you're not continually iterating and reiterating what's to come. And if stakeholders understand what's expected of them and when, they can't point the finger at you if they miss an approval deadline. At TeamGantt, we're big fans of dropping hints and cues as gentle reminders along the way. It's less about being a pest and all about setting your project and stakeholders up for success. Your project plan and subsequent status reports are simple tools you can use to establish process and responsibilities every step of the way. Your project plan is a living, breathing document that will likely shift and evolve once work begins, so use it as a reference point to communicate progress to stakeholders as you work to milestones. For example, let's say your team is almost ready to present work for review. Reach out to the stakeholder a couple days in advance to review the timeline and confirm they can still deliver feedback on time. And because a plan is visual, it's an easy way to show stakeholders how their approval impacts the entire project schedule. A weekly status report is the perfect opportunity to give stakeholders a heads up about what's coming down the project pipeline. When you talk through your status report, be sure to call out upcoming milestones and ask stakeholders if they foresee any issues with their deadlines. If you're concerned they won't make it happen, be upfront about the risks of missing a deadline. Eliminate surprises by using this opportunity to give stakeholders a brief process refresher and review roles and responsibilities. This is bound to happen at some point or another, and it's difficult to resolve because you can't really control stakeholders, especially if they happen to be the paying clients. So what do you do when a stakeholder misses a deadline that will completely alter your timeline? Here are 3 steps you can take to get your project back on track. The truth is, humans are part of the project process, and you can't control their actions 100%. If you've engaged stakeholders in the planning process and communicated expectations early and often, it's not your fault if they don't uphold their end of the bargain. The best thing you can do at this point is accept the situation and move into problem-solving mode. Even if the delay isn't your fault, it's your job as the project manager to address it. Showing how a delay affects your team's timing and work helps stakeholders realize the impacts of their inaction, and unfortunately, sometimes it takes a slip-up for people to get it. This is where TeamGantt's baseline feature comes in handy. For instance, if you set a baseline and then update your plan based on the new extended deadline, you can show stakeholders how their missed deadline shifts your entire plan. This is where the rubber meets the road. Take a look at the timeline and offer solutions to minimize the project damage. You might have to remove time from future review cycles, cut back on the project scope, or add more resources to the budget to meet the final deadline. Discuss alternate options with your stakeholders and be honest about what's possible to make sure they understand the impact of the delay and are on board with the plan moving forward. It won't be easy to sort out because the options are never ideal. Whatever you do, stand firm in the time you plan to execute the work and reiterate the importance of that time to the quality of the project. Just know you can always work through any issue, and while your stakeholders might not end up 100% happy, you're doing everything in your power to make up for the lost time and keep the project on track. Want even more tips and tools for managing stakeholder relationships? Check out Class 9, How to Manage Stakeholders in a Project, in our free online video course, The Art and Science of Leading Projects. Learn how to manage expectations and address red flags before they become an issue. Plus, download helpful resources like a stakeholder decision matrix and new stakeholder onboarding template. It's all on demand and totally free. That's it for today. I hope this has helped you hone your approval process and keep your projects from getting bogged down. If it has, I'd love it if you could return the favor and hit the like button. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our videos. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.